in the past 18 years, the first 9 years I worked directly with villages. And my day job was daily to kind of, mobilize and train communities to undertake development in human rights, in water and sanitation, in education and health. And in doing that, I went to all 4 provinces. I went to Gilgit-Baltistan. I went to Kashmir. And I realized that villages are heroes. I've seen villages changing. I've seen roadblocks which villages were able to overcome. But also observe that the limitation of the model also. Villages cannot transform villages on their own. They cannot sustain volunteerism. And that is the major limitations of that particular ground-up model. Luckily, the last 8 years I spent with the centralized planning at the system level, with the chief minister, with the chief secretary, with the planning and development secretaries and others. And I realized that most of these offices are well-meaning. They wanted to make change every day whenever they go to offices. They really want to make a transformational impact on their country. And I realized the power of politics, the power of the money government bring in, and the government ownership. But I also realized the limitation of centralized planning also. I thought that even centralized planning and the power of the chief minister and manifestos, that also cannot deliver unless they don't have community and people on their side. So I reached to a place where I had limitations and strengths of both of the models. And that particular framework, I was able to contribute in this particular argument I'm going to share with you. So let's unpack the problem. There are 79 million people who are poor in Pakistan. Out of them, 71 million people live in villages, which means poverty is essentially a rural problem. It's not an urban problem. It's essentially a rural problem. And when I tried to unpack the data, I saw that the poverty in urban areas declined very sharply. In the last 15 years, it declined from 24% to now less than 10%, single-digit figure. And that's a planning commission data, that's not my data. Poverty sharply declined in urban areas. But when you look at the rural areas, poverty did not decline with the same pace. It stagnated, actually. Even in times when Pakistan was growing 6 to 7% the growth rate, poverty did not decline meaningfully in rural areas. And that's a major problem, which means that either there's an urban bias in development policy, or there's actually implementation capacity of the state at the village level is very, very restricted. And I think that the second part is actually more important. But this is, for example, and this is not a surprise to us. We know that. We're sitting in Tharparkar, but if you go to Lahore or Karachi, you go out of the cities and you venture to any village, and you have, this is, for example, the picture of a school in Punjab. It's slightly better now, but are we surprised by this, the data? We're not surprised. This is an open secret. Or, for example, this isolated village in Muzaffargarh, where an old man told me that he went to voting for 7 times in his life, and still his village couldn't change, and state did not reach him. So I think that that's an open secret that the current development paradigm is not working for rural areas. And I think, and I told you earlier also, the essential elements of the state capacity do not really work at village level. You don't have a specialized garbage collection facility. The street pavement system doesn't work. State doesn't have any presence at village level. It doesn't have. The annual development plan is actually very scheme-based. You are waiting for years and years before a scheme comes at a village level. Before that doesn't happen. If you belong to a village, which I belong to, you go to one Eid, your street is same. You go to the second Eid, the street is same. You go 20 years later, the village remained the same. The reason is the state's own resources and its implementation capacity is not changing villages at a large scale. And I think that all of us have great hopes on local government. We think you bring local government, this will change everything. But my own experience, and this is not coming from just hearsay, this is from direct experience with conversations with Chief Minister, with several secretaries, with the Chief Secretary, others, in 2012, 13, 14. And my own argument is that 3 key offices, they don't really want local government to be empowered. And this is not, they're all well-meaning, good people. It's the way their offices are organized, they would never allow local government to really work. Chief Minister thinks that if, for example, he would have a local government system, he will have another 36 Nazims and another 36 chief ministers in his province. He wouldn't like that. Chief secretaries' offices are normally very conservative offices. Their training is the money should go from the government and reach to another government office. They are not comfortable with the idea that money should go to the citizens because they have to report back to auditors, and they're not very comfortable with that. So they would always oppose, for example, any empowered government which actually transfer money to villages and to the citizens. Then the MPs and MNAs by default, because they take votes from the districts, their interest is that if, for example, they have very empowered local government, they'll make them politically redundant after 5 years. You don't want another official with administrative financial powers working in your constituency. So all of these three offices, despite the fact that you have great law, when they sit for meeting after that, they water down the system. They don't let it work. I was in KPK talking to opposition even, and they said that when they'll come to power, the first thing they'll do will be to dismantle the local government. Because as a political idea, political parties, they didn't own this idea very. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm working with the government to still bring an effective system. But my worry is that in Pakistan, the next 20 to 25 years, local government will remain fragile. Now, what happens when state becomes absent from villages? Number one, the Human Development Index actually goes down, which we know that. But the second bit, which you don't know much, is deterioration of human rights at village level. They take the things in their own hand, and the tribal laws and the jirga system that play into action. What happened to Mukhtaram, for example? There was an incident, and villages got together, and they decided that we should punish Mukhtaram through their own tribal logic or whatever they were trying to do. Or this young couple which was burnt in Kasur by a mob, there was still another incident, and they decided to punish them through something, because state wasn't there. And I was very curious about this particular issue. So I discussed the whole chapter in my book. For example, I went to Rajanpur, where there was a major incidence of childhood marriages. And I investigated that. And I realized that the children of age 10, 12, 13, 14, they are married to old people. Even children who are not born yet, they are married also through a settlement deal with another family, through some kind of a system. And I thought that whole different kind of players were there. Religious leaders were there, village level. Tribal chiefs are there. Families are there. What is not there is government. You don't have, I investigated cases after cases, and I couldn't find even a single government official trying to kind of be there and prevent the situation. So my argument is that the state, for the sake of affirmative action, you don't have state at the village level. I mean, you have state when there's a murder or some kind of a flood or heinous crime. But other than that, for the affirmative action, you don't find Pakistani state system really be there. And what is the reason? The reason is that the state is centralized, and it was set up in 1861, 150 years ago, as a colonial structure. And after the freedom, you had to convert it into a citizen structure. But you couldn't do that. And therefore now, it does the status quo very well, the law and order bit, another bit, but it cannot deliver development. So what is the situation? Should we wait for that, or should come up with a new thinking? I think that you have to do three things. One, you have to kind of make villages, they treat them as independent, autonomous villages, as opposed to just recipients of your aid. Once you would start doing that, you develop a new institution at village level called Village Social, consisting of 300 to 400 households. You give them a bank account, a legal personality, and management information system code, and you make them part of the executive branch of the state. And you kind of reconfigure the state by having another office called Office of the Assistant Commissioner, outreach at the Tehsil level. Give him these 300 to 400 autonomous institutions. Give him a new technical institution like Anglo Foundation, or for that matter, Oxfam and others, to work with him. And ask him to work with these 300 to 400 institutions and develop them over time. And you can then see through and remove contractors. You bring the single line money transfer from the provincial office to the village. Let the villagers do their job, and then performance manage them through traffic light system by actually making some villages green, yellow, or red, and really focus them. Why I think that this would work? This actually worked, and I study in my book in details. I give the details of China and North Korea, where, for example, they shifted the whole emphasis on the rural economy, made villages autonomous, they gave them power, they gave them administrative power, focus, and that merger of the state capacity and the society's capacity over time transformed villages. I'm sure Tharparkar would transform and change. I'm sure Pakistan would transform and change, but we cannot do that without empowering communities. Thank you very much.